Hello arty peoples and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein and I'm your host this evening. Now today we have a really fun class planned which is going to be all about monochromatic painting, which is a really excellent thing to do if you are dealing with art block or just trying to practice your skill set. If you're tiptoeing into the realm of painting and have always done drawing, but you just wanted to kind of try this out, this is a really wonderful exercise for you guys to do no matter where you are in your art practice. So before I jump into today's lesson, I wanted to remind you that if you are interested in anything that I'm using throughout the show, you can go to the website JerrysArtarama.com and type in today's class code, which is JL376. I think it's down here on the corner. And it'll stay there for the show in case you want to reference back. But type in JL376 in our search bar on the website, and then our teacher's cart should come up, and then that way you can check everything out there. So, monochromatic painting. Just a quick definition of what that is. Essentially, I'm going to be painting in one color. Now, one color plus white and black so that I can get a variety of values. I am going to be using acrylics today. And to kind of quickly go over what I'm going to be working with, I have white, black, and then one single color in the Charvin acrylics. So these are not oil paints, they are acrylics, and I will go over the color once I show you my swatches and everything. I'm also going to be using our Da Vinci panel. I have a medium texture kind of surface, so it's not the ultra smooth. I wanted a little bit of texture. And I already have my sketch on there. I know you probably can't see it if you're watching straight overhead, but on the overhead camera you'll see it. I'm just going to be working with a little bird doodle that I have here. And then if you are interested in practicing with this specific image, I know my moderators are in the chats right now, and they can also give you the link to this royalty-free image for you guys to use if you want to check it out there. But I also have our painter's color diary, because when I started this process in going down the line of what color do I want to use when it comes to a monochromatic painting, I started swatching. Excuse the glycine there, just there to protect the page. So this is just a different variety of colors that I was swatching with. Now when it comes to swatching your colors, this is a really good thing to do, just so you can see there's a dab of like white paint on this edge, and then there's a dab of the pure intense black. Those are the two that I have consistently throughout all of my swatches. These are definitely the two colors that I knew I was going to use anyway: titanium white and intense black. So I had those set, but it was up in the air as to what color I was going to use. So when it comes to swatching your colors, I actually ended up going with the Alexander's blue, and I'll explain why. But every time you swatch, your colors straight out of the tube don't always automatically land right in the middle of your value scale. Colors inherently have a value to them. So for instance, yellow is inherently a really bright color, so it would land somewhere over here on the lighter side of your value scale, pure straight out of the tube. Of course, it does depend on what color yellow, because there are a lot of varieties out there. Now, something say like a purple can land a little bit darker on that scale as well. So when it came to swatching, I kind of shifted it a little bit kind of back and forth, and you can see I actually did write down where my pure colors were. I didn't grab anything that was inherently really bright or inherently really, really dark, but you can see I kind of shifted them a little bit here and there, because I was trying to find where my pure paint lands on my value scale just to begin with. So when it comes to swatching and figuring out your value scale, I usually start with the pure paint, and I figure out whether or not it's going to be somewhere in this range or maybe a little lighter or a little darker. I swatch that out, and then I start mixing in my white to my paint, and then I start getting a lighter and lighter and lighter until I get to, say, a pure white. This isn't exact. I was eyeballing it. I'm not going to be a stickler on whether or not they have massive steps. Like, I can tell you that this jumps from here to here a lot faster than like these right here. But that's what I would do for this side of my value scale, just to see what my paint's going to do once I start mixing in white pigment with it. Now on this side, I take the pure paint and I start mixing in the intense black or whatever black that you have, the paint that you have. And just to try and get the same kind of stepped value as well, just to try and see kind of what would happen when I kind of go that direction. Now, as you can see, there's my Alexander blue right here. And you can also see within this swatch book, there are, let me actually pull up here, this has I did a lot of swatches for this. I did not know what color I wanted. But down here you can see the unpainted swatches. So you can see this black line running throughout them. All of them have it, and you can see that is my transparency. So I can see whether or not it's a very, very, very transparent color straight out of the tube. Because, you know, the more titanium white that you mix into it, most likely you're going to get more and more opaque, just because titanium white is an opaque color. So that's what happened down here with like my purple. But as you can see, my pure color on a couple of these is kind of transparent. And I didn't love that, especially because I'm working with a time limit today. So I actually really loved this right here, how not only did I get beautiful steps in my my tints, which is what happens when you mix your paint with white, I also got some beautiful, almost gray-like colors when I started mixing in that intense black, and I liked it. It gave me almost like a totally different feel as far as color. So when it comes to, if you're going to do monochromatic painting, this is a really good way to start, just so that you have an idea of what your colors are going to do. Now, that being said, I am going to pull this one out. I can always pop it back in there if I want to keep this tucked away, but I am going to pull this out so that I can have my value scale kind of up here and have it there for a reference for me to use as I'm painting. Now, as far as the image, this is what it looks like. I did crop it in, obviously, and I'm sorry, there's a bit of a glare on the paper, but this is the image I'm working with. Now, when it comes to monochromatic painting, this is a beautiful image, but that's really not going to help me as far as value. So I threw it in a black and white filter. Yes, it kind of pulls a little warm, but that's okay. I'm not looking at color at all. I'm just looking at value. So my image is already sketched on there, and now I have my image prepared. This is also something that you can do if you have a phone and you have an image. You can actually go into your editing process and throw it in black and white. Always save it out as a separate image. Don't ever save over, because then you have both you can reference back to. So I'm gonna have my image probably right here for me to work with. And then, so I have my colors. I also have a glazing medium by Liquitex. This is one of my favorite glazing mediums, mostly just because it doesn't have a drying retarder in it, which if for anybody out there who doesn't know what a drying retarder is, sometimes glazing mediums have them in there, which prolongs your drying time. So it just dries a little bit slower. I don't want to mess with how fast this is going to dry, but what I do want to mess with is how opaque this is. Now, I wanted an opaque color, but for this very first layer, all I'm doing is toning my surface. So I'm going to take that pure paint, and oh, I do have a little bit of a paint booger because I put these out probably about couple minutes ago, and they're already starting to dry on me a little bit. It is acrylic, but as long as I have my acrylics in a blob, I can usually break through that little surface and then pull out some fresh paint. If I ever get to the point where that's becoming an issue, you can always just, you know, put some more paint on your canvas. But for this first level, words, I can say words. For this first step, all I'm doing is toning out that pure white of the canvas, and yes, I'm going straight over my drawing. This works really well with the glazing because I have that transparency, so I don't want to kind of kill my drawing. I want to keep it to where I can still see it, but I do want to kill the white of that canvas. I don't want white anywhere, because with monochromatic painting, my goal is to push the darks, push the contrast, and control where I put my pure white of my highlights, because that is how you control the viewer's eye, which is pretty cool to play around with. So,
Emmy,
yes.
We had a couple people join a little late. Can you remind us how you transferred your image really quick?
I I actually didn't go over that, which is a great question. Thank you for asking. So all I did, and just mostly because I was short on time, we do a lot of things around here, so I actually just took transfer paper and then I put the printed out image on top of that and literally just traced it through. I can draw this image freehand if I really wanted to. I just did not have the time to do that. So again, it's one of those things that some people will yell and scream that it is, what's cheating? Is that the word? Yeah. Cheating. The whole point of this exercise isn't drawing. It is painting and looking at value and observing value. So if that's what it takes for you to get to the point where you can have your drawing and your image on the canvas without having to worry about that, this lesson is not about drawing. Now, it is a great thing to practice your drawing skills. I always recommend that you do that. But again, if that's frustrating you, maybe do the tracing and then move on from there and then practice your drawing at a different time. It's always good to kind of practice your drawing skills. Okay, so as you can see, I messily covered my canvas with some paint. I'm actually going to make sure that that does dry fully. So if you have some questions, now is a wonderful time to pop those in the chats for me to answer. But I kind of wanted to start with like a sort of mid-tone. Now my paint happens to land kind of right in the middle of my value scale. I think this is the pure paint right here. It's sort of in the middle, but again, I didn't want to get super dark really fast, but I am going to start pushing the pure paint, and then I'm going to start with my titanium white, and then I'm going to pop in the mid to light values, and I'm going to start talking about kind of that process and how everything is relative. So it's one of those things where it's definitely still a little wet. Here, I got some areas here that I can probably dry if I brush them out a little bit. Everything when it comes to value is relative. So if I had this right here be my basic light tone, as soon as I start carving out darker areas, and actually, I wonder if we might actually be able to go to that side camera. This might be a little bit better to see close up. There we go. All right, so that darker value is still in the middle of my value scale, right? But compared to what's already on my canvas, it appears darker, right? Granted, it's, you know, darker in some areas, lighter in others. That's okay. So I'm also going to be painting kind of on the sort of messy side. I have a very detailed drawing just again because I traced, but I'm not painting to try and have this be photorealistic. If that's your goal, that is something that you can absolutely practice and start with big shapes. So like this whole section of my bird is pretty dark in value, so I'm kind of chunking that in and trying to make sure that I can still see sort of my drawing through the shapes that I'm painting, if that makes any sense. So like for instance, I can see my drawing right now because I can, you know, see through the transparent layer that I put down, but as soon as I start painting this, my whole drawing is going to start disappearing. So I'm chunking this out right here, and I'm going to put that down as one big layer. Now, if I keep painting on top of that, there's no way I'm going to be able to see where things are, which is okay because, again, we can always practice those skill sets. But if I start putting down different values and things like that, it will help me keep my drawing while not actually fully painting transparently, I guess is the way to describe that. So this whole chunk is also really dark, but I'm not going to paint that in yet because if I do, I lose that line in between those two sections. Now, if you really wanted to, what you could also do is paint up until that little section and kind of leave a little sliver, just to give yourself like an indication of where that would be also works. But I am mostly just chunking in kind of my mid-tones right now. Right? And then for this little guy's face, he has a highlight that's kind of hitting him on the side of his face. And I want to block that in because as soon as I do, that's really going to start giving him his little personality. Again, I'm not super worried. This is like a mid-tone color. But again, it appears darker since everything else is quite light. So, just working with pure paint right now too. And I also have a really bad habit of getting married to a brush. So once I chunk in kind of this little area of his head, which is all in dark, except for the little highlights that are on top, and I'll show you kind of what I'm talking about here in a second. I'm gonna actually switch brushes. I know, crazy, me switching brushes. Because all of his face gets into smaller little details, and if I try to paint that in with this brush, I'm going to drive myself a little crazy. Yes, we have a question?
Yeah, on YouTube, Jazz was wondering, do you try to establish the darkest darks first or the lightest lights first?
You know, that's a really good question. And in case you guys didn't hear the question, do I establish dark darks or do I establish light lights first? The beauty of acrylics is that you can go either way. You can take your paint and you can make it darker. You can also take that darker paint and make it lighter. Whereas like with oil paints, you really want to work from dark to light. Acrylics kind of give you that wiggle room where you can still layer on top of everything that you do. And if I end up hating all of what I just painted, I can completely paint over it and obliterate it and start from scratch. That's kind of the beauty of acrylics. Now, granted, I do know that there are some people that say that you should work in a certain way. I always suggest that you find what works best for you. I like to start with a mid-tone and work my way from there, if that makes any sense. Now, whether I start with a mid-tone and work with my darks first, or if I start with that mid-tone and work with my lights first, it depends on how I feel. Sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's the other. I did not clean this brush off very well, excuse me. All right, but yeah, that's a really great question. Unless you're working in oils or watercolors specifically, acrylics kind of give you the wiggle room of doing either which way. Watercolors, you have to work from light to dark because you need to preserve your whites, and you have a hard time getting those whites back if you cover them in dark paint. And then oils is the opposite. All right, so I have my little round brush here because I want to start chunking in where his eyes are. Now, I will say I'm going to get pretty painterly with most of this, but the one thing I usually never get painterly with is your eyes and your face, because it's one of those things that as long as that is pretty on point, especially even with portraits, you can actually get away with a lot of painterly brush strokes and it will still appear like the person or thing that you are painting. So this right here, most of his face on this side is in darkness. So I'm going to also just chunk all of that in with one solid color, and we can come back to that later once I start getting my darks in. But that will work for me right now. And then he's got his little beak. That's the bottom of his beak. And then this is right where he's got a funky little area of his beak that goes really bright right there. And then I'm going to paint around. I don't know what the actual term is because I'm not a birdologist. I don't know what the word for that is either. Yep. I knew Katie would die a little. Ornithologist. I know. I'm not a bird person, but I don't know what that's called. when it comes to their face, what I always call like the bags of their eyes. I think it's always just the funniest little detail on birds, but they always have like these little, right here, I have the bag under his eye. It's part of his eye, but I always call it the bird eye bags. He's real sleepy, real tired. Okay, so we're about to the point where I have gotten most of this mid-tone for his beak, or for his face, right around his beak. And then I will start going in with the brighter areas. Now, right here, on that side of his face, I told you he had a highlight that's coming in. And I can even show you that here. All of that, I painted a solid mid-tone color. The reason why is because I want to layer my midtones on top of this, because it allows me to get, instead of having to like paint around all those little details, which is, you know, I don't have the patience for that. I can just lay down this midtone and even, you know, the darker darks if I wanted to. And then I could just pop out those highlights on top of that. And then the darkness is already there behind it, so I'm not having to carve around all those little details. But it's one of those things where you can push it either which way. But for me personally, I find that this actually works really well. Again, get my midtones established, and then I go darker and lighter from there. So his little darkness of his eyes right there. And it kind of comes around. Alright, so I'm trying to also look at this image and paint at the same time. There we go. Sort of, you know, got his little face blocked in. Nothing too fancy. Again, we're still just working with like a mid-tone color and that tone that we established there. Again, I'm going to just paint through all of those little highlights. Now, right here, it gets really bright on his chest. I'm not worried about that either. I'm going to, just because it's a super bright white, it already has color established on there, so I'm not going to have to paint anything extra on that. I just want to kind of knock down everything that's not that right now. Right. And this is one reason why I love a round brush, is because if you do, this is something that I do all of the time, I pull my brush flat on my palette, and so it almost gives me like a filbert shape, because I have a flat pointy kind of, you see how I flattened my round a little bit. And as I paint, I kind of keep that flatness on that one side. So I use it almost like a flat brush. Flat filbert kind of sort of shape. But it kind of lends really well into like bird feathers. I think it's pretty fantastic. Okay, so chunk all this in. I'm not trying to be really opaque with this right here, just because I know it gets a little bit lighter. I'm just trying to tone it down a little, just a little bit more on there. Okay, now I'm gonna add a little bit of white to my paint, which actually, I wonder if I can, if I pull this, yeah, that actually would be great. There we go. Add a little bit of white, and I'm gonna actually just kind of keep a running, I call it my running puddle of paint, where I have like white mixed with the Alexander's blue. Now this will shift a little bit lighter and a little bit darker between those two of these colors, depending on what I'm painting. But it's one of those things where it will go back and forth. But I don't mix a giant amount of paint, just because when it comes to like my scale, I know I'm gonna land somewhere in here. I just am not trying to mix the exact same color every single time. I think that gives you a lot of like broken color and a little bit more visual interest when it comes to your paintings. So that's why I don't ever mix like just a big batch of color. It just becomes kind of flat. Now, if you do paint in like a graphic-y kind of flat style, that would be a really great thing for you to do, is to mix just the same kind of value to where that way you can pull from the same thing and it has that consistency. But that is a stylization kind of choice. So if that's what you're doing, that's wonderful. But if that is not what you're doing, this is a really wonderful way of getting some visual interest with your colors. Now, again, I have white and the titanium white and my Alexander blue. And I will grab a little of the white and pull it in, and it gets a little bit lighter. And then I'll grab a little bit of the blue, and it gets a little bit darker. And I'll go back and forth like that, just to kind of try and give myself a couple different variations. Now, right here on my bird, there's a bright white. I am not painting this bright white. The reason why is because I want to control where my pure whites are. That is not where I want it to be. It's going to be higher in value, so it's going to be a lot lighter, but it's not going to be pure white. I'm not going to put any pure white into this painting until either the face or at the very, very end, because sometimes I do like to establish how bright my bright whites are, but I find that I don't love doing that until the absolute end, because once I do that, it shows me where the bright whites are, but I haven't even put in any of my darks. So when it comes to that, it can get a little confusing. But again, this is still, we're just kind of exploring where the value is on this bird. But I never go pure white. Okay, pull a little bit of lightness down. All right. And then he does have some reflective light that's coming up and hitting him on his little tummy here. Now that is because of how bright the light is hitting the ground that he's standing on. It's hitting the ground and it's bouncing back up. And that's why you're getting some of these lights in his tail feathers, in the back feathers, as well as kind of up underneath his little tummy there. Again, because I'm not worried about color or anything like that, all I'm worried about is value. So I will just lighten that value just a little bit, because I still shouldn't be as bright as like around his face where those highlights are going to be, but it will be on the brighter side, brighter than like say the darks. Okay, now I can start establishing the little highlights that he has on his face. Now, if anybody out there also, can you see that? Is that a good place for it? A little bit lower? Is that better? Try to make sure you guys can see his little face. Actually, let me also move the water over here so I'm not reaching across. That might be a little bit better. Okay, so is anybody out there kind of either new to acrylic painting or having some issues with their acrylic painting? Because this is a great time to ask those questions, because I know acrylic painting, you're combating how fast the water is evaporating from the paint, so I can understand how sometimes that can be really frustrating. So if you guys do have questions about that, let me know. Now what I'm doing right now is, and actually I can probably move my puddle, my working puddle of paint over a little bit so you guys can see it. I keep going back and forth or pulling more blue, because right now I have just the pure Alexander blue on where the top of his head is. And as I'm laying down little highlights, I'm realizing that some of them are a little too bright. So I want to slowly shift that. And I'm constantly kind of just really lightly touching so I can get what appears to be little feather kind of marks, but I'm not, it's just, they're brush strokes, you know, I'm not actually painting in feathers. I'm just little dabs of paint. That's all we're doing. We're just squishing paint around. It's nothing too serious. Right? And then I know all of this gets pretty light So I am going to shift that value as well. Yeah. Oh, I thought we had a question. Sorry. And maybe a little dabs here and there, again, just to indicate that there might be some feather action happening, but I'm not actually painting in feathers. They're just dabs of paint. Now, when I do that, also, I do pay attention to the direction of the little feathers, because I don't want to go the opposite direction of that feather when I'm dabbing it on, because that would get confusing as far as like, why is that direction going, or the feather going that direction. It's one of those things that, yes, I'm just blobbing on paint, but I am trying to be conscious of the direction of his actual natural feather kind of tufts, if that makes any sense. Feather tufts. All right, so you can see, we have a question?
Yes.
All right.
Sherry was wondering, so it's a 2-in-1 question.
Yeah.
What type of canvas or substrate would work best for fluid acrylics? And the same question for thicker or buttery consistency acrylics.
That I feel like is going to be a lot of personal preference, but when it comes to fluid acrylics, you're really going to want to pay attention to surface texture, just because that's going to come across. Usually fluid acrylics self-level. So if you have a very textured canvas or something, you know, that the fluid acrylics are going to flow into those little nooks and crannies. They're going to start taking on the texture of whatever it is that you're painting on. So like right now I'm working on a medium textured, like the medium, is it medium textured? I think that's actually what it's called. Medium textured Da Vinci canvas. So with that being said, this is actually not super bumpy because it's not canvas. It is a sprayed on texture. We do have an ultra smooth, so if you wanted it even smoother, that's something that you could find as well. But it's one of those things that if this were like a bumpy canvas, you'd see those bumps come through, and that will affect how you can paint, especially if you're trying to paint with brush strokes and things like that. That can get a little frustrating. So that one is more indicative of you need to pay attention to the surface texture. When it comes to impasto painting, I find that when you paint thickly, it does not matter as long as you get that adhesion. You don't want anything obviously that's oil primed, because then you'll have adhesion issues. But I've never really found a surface texture that doesn't work with impasto painting. Just because, you know, your paints are gonna kind of stick to everything. I do want to kind of just establish this little beak crack kind of situation that's going on there. But yeah, that's really the biggest thing for mostly just going to be the fluid acrylics. And then on top of that, it's everything beyond that is going to be personal preference. So if you really like the Senso canvas is fantastic, but it is a clear primed linen, so it has that kind of brownish kind of tone to it already. Excuse me. So it's one of those things that if that's what you like, because I love the Senso, just because it happens to be that gritty kind of linen texture. But if I'm painting with fluid paint, that might be a problem. Because that canvas texture is going to come through. But it's one of those things that I really love the color of raw linen, so it's worth it for me. Yes, we have another question?
Yes. Suzanne said she lives in a very dry climate, and there are times when the paint almost dries before she can finish a brush stroke.
I can understand that. Yes, that is when you are going to want to work with a drying retarder. Whether it's a separate medium you put into your acrylic paints, I know Lucas has one, and it comes in a big squeezy bottle, which is super convenient when you're just flipping the bottle open and dumping it out and kind of. I actually like to put drying retarder on top of my paints. So I just squeeze out my paints, and then I put like a layer of drying retarder on top. Then as you're pulling, that drying retarder tends to flow back over top of the paint and kind of seal it back in. But then the other option is working with paints that already have it mixed in. like the Golden Open is a really fantastic, especially if you would just live in somewhere where it's already just so hot. It's one of those things that we all have different climates and we got to work with them sometimes. So those are two great options for you, just because there's really not a whole lot of other choices when it comes to acrylics staying workable for longer, you know? Now, I know I said I wasn't usually going to add white to my canvas, and I just wanted to kind of quickly address that here. I am going to add the pure white to the tip of his beak, just because I feel like I was losing that drawing a little bit. So that's one of those things where I will say usually I don't do that, but sometimes there is a cause for that. And if I'm losing my drawing, or if I'm kind of forgetting where that highlight will go, or if it's going to help me visually establish what's going on in my painting, I will put them in. It's one of those things that I also might paint over top of it later on. Who knows? If I were working in color, that might be something that I'd paint over. But considering it's monochromatic, I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem. But sometimes it shifts. Sometimes our plans with our paintings have to shift around. All right, so this is a little dark for his eye, but that's okay, because I'm going to pop, again, I like to establish that kind of mid-tone, and then I'm going to pop in some highlights on top of that. Right? And then I'm going to get a little bit lighter. Again, I'm not working with a pure white yet. I'm going to just kind of dab in just the side of his little eyeball and all the little highlights that I'm seeing. I'm also really loving these acrylic questions you guys have. I love when you guys are asking questions like that. I know it can kind of be frustrating when your mediums aren't working for you and kind of working against you. So if you guys have any more of those, let me know. All right, and then a little bit of a highlight over there, and there's just a little bit of highlight on a feather that's popping that way. Now, I do have to establish a little bit more of his highlights on the face. I got distracted by his eye, and I forgot about this. That also happens with me with my paintings. I get really distracted by the pretty something or other that caught my eye. In this case, it was his eye, but that happens. All right, and I want to establish a little bit of lighter areas here. Again, nothing is pure white yet. Just popping those in. And then a little bit brighter here, here, a little tuft here. Kind of goes down. He's a little fat burb. We were saying that earlier. He's not a bird, he's a burb. All right, now again, usually I don't do this either, but I am going to pop in the little white highlight of his eye. I might paint over top of it just because it's one of those things that I still haven't even gotten to the darks yet. I haven't mixed anything with the dark, the black yet. I'm still just working with titanium white and that Alexandra blue, which, to be honest, oh wow, it is 6:13. I will work a little bit faster here. Again, it's one of those things that as long as you get the eyes and the face kind of painted in really nicely, the rest of it can kind of go by quickly. Now, I was worried that I was going to kind of run out of time a little bit, so I am going to kind of take this off the table, and then I'm going to just magically have it done. Ta-da!
How did you do that?
What? This is what happens when you practice so often, it just magically happens. Look at that. All right, so I did want to get to my my darks and establish them. This is, actually, can we go to that overhead camera real quick? Because I want to show the whole thing. So this is, sometimes I work this way where I have only worked with the titanium white and the Alexander blue. I haven't added anything else in. You can, if you want to, stop here. You don't have to actually mix in the black for this to be an established painting. Like, he works really well with just the titanium white and a blue. but I want to push those values. I want to push my contrast. So I am going to start mixing that in with my Alexander Blue. Now, this intense black is intense and it is very strong, but it's one of those things that, again, I'm going to work with my working puddle here and kind of keep that going. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start trying to carve out those dark areas in my little bird's face, and just pulling out the contrasting areas that are really important. It's one of those things that not everything has to kind of be established as far as like a fully rendered thing, but again, I do want to push what is happening around his face, just because I think I really love the idea of always having like a tightly rendered face, and then the rest of it kind of gets a little painterly and funky, which is fun. But, you know, again, if you're working with like photorealism, you can take your time and really get those little, the darks established everywhere instead of just the eyes. But, so this is where I'm going to actually be kind of on the careful side. And then I am going to get a little faster with it. You can always tell when I'm like trying to paint a little bit faster is that my my sentences become a little bit more broken because I'm concentrating real hard. I might have gone a little dark there. So again, the beauty of acrylic is that I could just let that dry, but since it's still wet, I can actually go back in and pull a little bit more of that Alexander Blue, and then I can push my contrast with that intense black and then pop that in darker and kind of pull out the shape that I just destroyed in painting. There we go, little eye. All right, so now one thing I also really love about these shows is that whenever we're painting animals or little buddies, you guys come up with the best names ever. So I'm gonna need help naming my little buddy here. So what is this little guy's name? He is, I'm pretty sure, a very sassy little burb. Sassy little chunky burb. But it's one of those things that you guys come up with the best names, really. You really, really do. Okay, so I'm gonna get that intense black in there because then it gets real dark. Right around his little eye. He's all in shadow. Right? And how is it already 6:18? I swear, time flies whenever I'm painting on set. It's wild how quickly things happen here. But with it being 6:18, and I know our show is going to come to an end in about 10 minutes, which is crazy. If you guys do have any last minute questions, as well as, you know, of course, names, let me know. And of course, if you are watching in the future and I haven't gotten to your questions while we're live, that's okay. Pop them in the comments. We always make sure we go back to check them in case we missed anybody while, if you're watching back at a later time. A little bit less dark kind of transition from that Alexander Blue to the dark areas that are happening right around here. So a little bit lighter in value, but I just want to like pop a little feathers here and there.
So far we have a Chester.
chest.
Also, any Angry Bird always looks like a Eustace to me.
Eustace. Like, always just reminds me of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah.
On YouTube, we have a person who likes when you call him Burp.
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 He's Burb the Burb.
Bert the Bird.
He's a sassy little burb. Okay, so establishing those darks, and then I got his little face knocked in. Now, in case, you know, we run out of time, this is exactly how I approach everything from the feet to the wings to everything. And I actually here's a good example of what happened. I just touched the wrong part of my painting, so I'm going to take a paper towel and just wipe off what I just did because I didn't want to cover up that little highlight area. And if you catch your acrylics fast enough, sometimes you can fix your boo-boos. But even me, I sometimes mess up in painting. That's okay. All right, and I'm actually going to switch to a little bit larger of a brush so I can cover some more surface area. You have a question?
Yes. Someone was wondering on YouTube if there's a name for a blue tonal drawing, like a sepia tone is a...
Well, I know that there is a name for gray, there is a name for green, Verdi, and grisaille. Those are Italian terms. When it comes to all the other colors, I don't think they technically have names for them, but I would assume it has to do with the color that is being used, if there is one. So if there isn't technically a name for that, and you guys want to make it up right now, let me know, because we are always about that. Now, if I mix in a ton of this blue and get a slight, just ever so slightly gray kind of color happening. This is what I meant by I get painterly with it. I'm just blobbing in a little bit of color here, or the dark values here and there. I'm not being precise with it, but I am paying attention to my brush stroke directions and shapes as much as I can when I'm being really fast. But what's cool about this is that I don't have to paint in every single little detail. Your eye makes up the details for me. So as long as I'm paying attention to the fact that his core shadow, just like any other object, birds have core shadows too, doesn't ever land on the edge of an object. It lands a little further in, and then you know, it goes with the shape of his body. And if I pay attention to where those are, your eye fills in the rest of the information and tells you that that's a form turning in space, which is really cool. You have another question?
Yes, we have another question from YouTube. Wondering when you use black, it tends to create a muddy color when mixing. And they were wondering if they're using the wrong color black.
That is very possible, because not all black paints are made the same. There are a lot of different blacks out there. There's Mars black, ivory black. This is an intense black. Again, just like any color, they are pigments. Those pigments pull in different values, or not values, I'm sorry, temperatures. So like some of them can be a little cooler, some of them can be a little warmer. So if you're painting with a warm black with a cool color, it's going to make mud, because warm and cool are opposites and they're going to go kind of in a funky kind of realm. That's why I went with the intense black, because it's a cooler blue kind of black when you mix it with white. So I knew it's going to work really, really well with the blue color that I have. Now, if I went with a Mars black, that Mars black is a little bit warmer, so it might make mud. The best thing I can always tell you to do is just swatch, play with your colors, see what they will do. All right, we got 6 minutes. I think I can get this little guy mostly established. I'm not going to even attempt his feet. because I don't think I'm going to have time for that. But I think I will have time for most of his little feathers back here. Because they're mostly all in dark, and if I just establish a couple of those wispy ones that kind of break the darkness with a little bit of light coming through, I can probably chunk the rest of that out in dark kind of color. Just like that. Now I'm not giving myself a hard edge because those feathers that are kind of coming around his tummy and coming to, and kind of meeting up with the dark, it's not a hard edge. They have a lot of like little wispies to them. So I'm using my brush to my advantage and kind of touching and flicking it inward, which is almost giving like a dry brush effect. And using that, I'm using that to my advantage and giving myself a little texture just right in a little spot right there. So it makes it look like a funky little feathered edge, which is perfect because they're feathers. Aha. Get it? Sorry. I'm not sorry. Terrible jokes. All right. I think for the most part, his little body is established as far as like the darks are concerned. And then we'll pop in just a little bit here, just to give him a little bit of contrast. Now, I quickly wanted to talk about background before I officially sign off on here, because I did touch in the lights here around his legs and everything, and the reason why is because I needed that light established underneath and his, like where he's standing, just so I can have the contrast of that Alexander blue. Now I can definitely make that darker, but I wouldn't go super dark. I might go with this like slightly lighter gray kind of version where it's not that dark. Because there's not a whole lot of really, really dark shadows happening on his legs. The darkness is on the bottom of his feet. And when you put that really dark black on the bottom of his feet, like especially where he's standing and his feet are touching the table that he's standing on, that will ground him as an object and make him have like, he's got weight to him. He's grounded with that shadow that's hitting underneath his little feet. The legs don't get that dark. I will always push the contrast of the shadows right underneath his little feet. And then of course, as your shadow gets further away, it's gonna get a little lighter. But that lightness around his legs are going to help me establish the difference between those back feathers right here on his little tail feathers and right there, because I didn't want to go any darker there. I just wanted to keep this light, but to be able to see the differences between them, I had to go lighter here. That's what I was talking about earlier, is that everything is relative. Now, I have established the darkness around his body here. Now, if you look at the image, you can see the edge of him, and this is lighter in value than the back of his body, but right here, his body is lighter than the value of this. Now, I understand that we can probably try and get a color that is sort of in the realm of that and have the same color go across. Now, this is a technique that a lot of old masters use, is that I can actually put a darker color around the light area of his little body. And if that matches too much the area on his back, I can actually lighten that slightly. Maybe go with like almost like a pure Alexander blue. Oop, again, my paints are starting to dry. It's giving me some, I lovingly call those paint boogers. There's no other word really for it. If I establish that as a little bit lighter, and I'll worry about getting that kind of toned out that way, then that will push the contrast between his body right here and the background and body over here and that background. They don't technically have to match. The only area that you have to worry about is up here where they meet. And happily enough, there's something going on back there, and I can just paint that in and have it be something that's a little blurred out, a little different, but I could very easily also just kind of have my brush strokes be the transition that I need. But it's one of those things where you can actually keep that darkness around his face over here just so that contrast is there and it's popping. This is also something that I really love to talk about. If you paint your background in before you establish those highlights, that's why I usually don't, because I will go over on top of this with, say, my round brush with my pure white. It's starting to dry. It's been out for an hour. And then I will paint on top of that dark background, which gives my edges a really pretty quality and makes it look like that bird has now been sat on top of the background, not trying to carve around it. I'm not trying to, you know, destroy myself with those details. And of course, last thing that I do before I officially end something is my little highlights. Unless I've already established them and they're already there. Now, while I'm popping these little highlights in, do we have any last minute questions? I know we are running out of time officially. Also, I really hope you guys get a chance to try this. It is so fun. It's a really good practice. And also, if you have like artistic block happening, because that happens to us sometimes, you know, this is a really wonderful way of kind of getting out of your head and keeping your skill set sharp, while also just having a little fun and painting a little fat bird, which is always happy. Unless you're really, really not into birds. That's okay. You can paint other things too. You got options. But there is my monochromatic painting. I hope you guys enjoyed the process and have learned lots and got all kinds of tips and tricks. Of course, you know, I will be finishing this, and I can also post this image once I fully finish to our Jerry's Life Facebook group. Now, if you guys are interested in joining, if you aren't already part of it and want to go see my finished painting, you just have to make sure you answer that one security question when you go over there. It is on Facebook. It's Jerry's Life Facebook group. Currently, I think it's definitely over 7,000 people in there. It's just a group of artists, which are really fun. And so if you do have any questions as far as like your technique, your practice, even if you're just like, hey, want some feedback, it's a really wonderful place to post your artwork and get feedback from like-minded people. I mean, we're artists. We really, really benefit with getting the creative mindset and bouncing ideas off of one another. It's a really, really fun little community over there. So I hope you guys get a chance to join. But again, make sure you answer that one security question. But I will be posting my little burb. Did we ever decide on a name before I officially sign off? What were my options here? I'm sorry. Chester. Eustace.
Rocky Robin.
Oh.
Bert.
I feel like Bert is going to win. Bert, is this a little Bert face? I feel like he's a little Bert. I feel like that's... Huh?
Blueberry bird brain.
Say that again?
Yep. Blueberry bird brain.
Blueberry brain?
Blueberry.
You guys know I struggle with words. I think that wins. His first name is Bert. That's his middle name. Or last name. Maybe Brain is his last name. That one. But that was the show, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys get a chance to try out monochromatic painting. Of course, again, if you are watching this in the future and you have questions, make sure you add it as a comment. I will always go back and check in and answer them that way. And I think that's everything. Man, today flew by. It's wild how fast these things fly by. But, of course, make sure you check us back next week because Michaela is going to be back on, and we're going to actually have a guest. We're going to have Scott Stevenson on talking about Daniel Smith watercolors, which is so amazing. I hope you guys have had a chance to check those out. And if you don't, you know, we're going to be going over amazing colors next week. So that is everything. I will see you guys then.